Hey friends, welcome to this first video about the Power BI desktop interface. So before we get started, let me just say my assumption here is that you have never worked with Power BI before, so it's completely new for you, which is great because this allows us to explore it together. If on the other hand you already have seen Power BI or worked with it before, feel free to skip this lecture, but I would still recommend have a look at it, let's go through it and see whether you already really know everything which is inside here. So let's get started. When you first open Power BI Desktop, you should see an interface which is kind of similar to this one. Why do I say kind of? Well, the reason is that Power BI from Microsoft is under constant development. That means, depending on when you see this video, then the interface might have slightly changed. But no worries, because everything you learn here in this course is up to date and you can use it in Power BI. And also in the future, when I will re-update the videos, then of course you also will then see the other or new interface. So to get started, this is what you should see when you first open Power BI Desktop. So normally there's also a pop-up window, but I already closed this, and then this is actually the interface you have at the beginning. Now, what we need in order to get started with Power BI is of course some data, right? And the way to import data into Power BI is quite simple, because already on the starting page here, it tells us to add data to our report. Now we have various options in here. The first one would be this one here. If we want to import Excel data, you can simply click on this Excel logo here, and then you can navigate to a specific folder on your desktop or on a shared drive you might have, and then simply select the file you want to use and import this in Power BI. The other option, I will not do this here now, are of course here also I can use data from SQL Server, or I can also here paste data into a blank table. So you can also copy and paste data into Power BI, Control C, Control V, or you can also try a sample data set. If you want to start with some sample data, this is financial data which comes from Microsoft. You can click here and select the sample data set. Of course, these are not all the sources we have in Power BI. We can also go to get data from other source. If the source you want to use is not there, then you can click here, get data from other source, and then a little window appears, just a second, there it is, and there we can specify the source we want to have. And you can see already there are quite a lot of data sources we can see here, right? So all data sources regarding databases, flat files, and also some web data sources as well, and of course also the cloud like Azure and so on. If you want to filter this a little bit, simply go here in the search and type in the database you want to search for. For instance, if I search Oracle, just as an example here, I would see Oracle database in here. Or I could, of course, also pre-select the data I want to filter. For instance, if I want to have a file data source, I can go to File, and I would see all the file options I have. I can also go to other things like Microsoft Fabric, which is currently in preview here, and also other kinds of sources like Azure and others, and online sources and so on. So I would assume that you probably find the data source you want to connect to inside these options in here. So let me just close this. This was the second option to click here. And of course, there's also inside this ribbon menu on the top, the option to get either data from these sources here, like Excel Workbook, then there's SQL Server. Enter data would mean we add data manually, so copy paste. There's the so-called Data Hub. Microsoft might rename this in the future, but right now it's called Data Hub. And under Data Hub, there are also data sources regarding Microsoft. For instance, Power BI datasets, data marts, lake houses, and warehouses. So all these ones are also from the brand new Microsoft Fabric. And then there's also Dataverse, which is also a database which comes from Microsoft directly. You can also go to recent sources if you have worked with Power BI before, and then you can refer to a recent source. Or the same menu as we've seen when we click here, there's also this Get Data option. You can click here, and then you can select the database or data source you want. And of course, you can also go to More. And if you do this, you will see exactly the same window appearing here. And again, you can choose the specific data source you want to use. So you can see there are various options to achieve the same thing in Power BI. And this is actually not only here the case, but this also you will see it later on, that this is actually something which I call redundancy a little bit in Power BI. So you can do the same thing on multiple places. But I personally think this is quite good, because sometimes you might not spot exactly immediately where to find a specific option, and then it's good to have it on various places. So let me just close this. I just wanted to mention that. All right, so these are the data sources we have in order to connect to data to get started. And this is something we're going to cover then, of course, in the next couple of videos. Before I continue, I would like to mention that currently my interface is always with the big icons, but some people prefer it to have the small icons. And there's an option, like for various, in this case, Microsoft products, to simply click on this little up arrow here and switch ribbons. And if you do this, then you have this kind of menu. So some people prefer the little icons here. And if you do so, please go ahead and feel free to switch to this specific view. But during the course, I will keep the bigger icons here because that's what I'm used to and that's what I prefer. But again, that's totally up to you what you prefer. So that's it for the data we have here. Then next, still under the home ribbon here, we have the option to transform data here. This is regarding queries and also refresh. Refresh is currently grayed out because we do not have any data in here, but the transform option is still is already available. And what it does basically is, it depends on your prior knowledge, but what it is a so-called Power Query editor. So if you have worked with Excel a lot before, then this is quite familiar to you. But what it allows us, if you hover it, it also tells you, it allows us to connect to data and also to prepare data, to clean the data, to transform the data. What is meant by that is that most often, and you all know that, in the real world, the problem is that we have some data, but this data is, let's say, messy, right? It's not in the right format. We need to clean it. So we need to transform it in order to make it work for us and then create our reports, our visualizations, and so on. And this is what the Power Query editor allows us to do. So we can use some kind of messy data, import it into the query editor, then we transform it, we clean it, we shape it exactly the way we want it, and then we load it into Power BI, and then with this clean data, we then create our reports. I also like to mention is that when we do this in the query editor, we do not change the underlying data. So all the transformations are done in Power BI, but our underlying data source will not change, okay? So that's also something I like to mention because not everyone knows that. Then under refresh, as I said before, it's kind of probably intuitive, but this just means that if you work with Power BI and in the meantime, the underlying data source changed because, for instance, someone has edits the Excel file or the file you use in Power BI, and then of course you can click on this refresh option, and then the imported data in Power BI gets refreshed, and then you have the latest data. For instance, let's say there's a new month and you get new financial data and you want to refresh it, or new sales data and you want to refresh it, then you can simply click refresh icon here and you see the latest data in your report. Just make sure that the data structure does not change, because otherwise, if for instance some kind of columns are missing in your file, then of course Power BI will complain because it will not find the columns. Okay? So under visual options here, we have the option to import visuals into our report. And these are actually templates we have. So if I click on new visual here, for instance, you see that I have a template in here. It shows here bar chart, but it is actually a template which we now need to fill with data. So put something on the x-axis, on the y-axis, on the legends, and so on, right? So we can specify what we want to see here. Also, it tells us here you need data to build a visual, select get data and add some, right? Because currently we don't have anything. But that's basically what it is. It's just a template for visualization if we simply click here. And let me just click delete here. Of course, there are also these kind of visuals here. These are the default ones which you can find. So let me just click on this to open the visual gallery. You can see there's a bar and column charts are there. There are line charts, waterfall, funnel charts, and so on. Various maps, the pie donuts, the tree map, and so on. So all these kinds of visualizations are available for us. And also if you are or have a data science background, there also are in Python visuals if we want to use them as well. And also some AI visuals, because the AI is also kind of hot topic right now, right? So there are also some built-in visualizations which use AI technology in Power BI. So next to this, there's also an option to add text box, so any kind of texts in Power BI. So if you simply click here, let me do that, then you can see there's my text box, and now I can add some data here. For instance, I could say, hello, welcome to Power BI, so like that. And then if I press Ctrl A, I can select everything, and then I can customize this. I can make it bold. I can change here the font if I like to have a different font, so Dean for instance, and also make this bigger. Let's say 20. You can see that it's bigger. I can make this also bigger. if I hover over the three dots, I can drag this around. You can also do it if you hover over the line sometimes, but I think this is more difficult. For me, I always use the three dots to drag it. It's easier for me. And of course, if I go here, select everything, Control A again, I can also then also use all these things I have here. I can center it if I would like to do this. I can write it in italic, underline it. I can also insert a link if I want to do this, and other kinds of options. They also can add dynamic inputs here. For instance, I can add a specific measure which I calculate, for instance, sales revenue, and this will be dynamic inside this text. This can also be added here. So I'm going to show this. Of course, we dive deeper into visualizations later on, but for now, let's just say this is how easily we can add text boxes in here, and of course, drag them around. Next to this, we have the option to add more visuals. So this just means that if the default visualizations we have in Power BI, if those are not enough for you, because you say, for a specific use case, I need a different visual, something which is not available in here. Then there is an option to import also custom visuals. This is under more visuals. And there are two options, either from app source or from my files. The difference is that from my files means that you would need to have downloaded the specific visuals up front, and then you can refer here, click here for my files and navigate here, caution, import visuals and so on. But if I go to import now, I can navigate to a specific folder and then I can select the specific visual I want to use. From app source, on the other hand, let me go one more time, more visuals, app source, this will open a navigation window here, but I need to be aware that this will only work if you are signed into Power BI. So in order to use app source from here, you need to be signed in with a Power BI account. You can sign up for Power BI for free, but you can only do it with corporate account, so your work email address, for instance, or an institutional account, like a school or anything like that. There are some workarounds, but these are actually the normal default settings at least. So if I go to from app source here, just to show this to you, just a second, then this window appears, Power BI visuals, and there you can see there are a lot of visuals in here, which I can choose from. Some of those are free, other ones you have to pay for. They have some kind of features which are premium features, and they can only be enabled if you pay for the visual. So what you can search here, filter by specific topics, for instance, to find a specific visual. You can click the search here up there. You can sort by popularity, or also, which might be more interesting regarding company and environments, that you can search for Power BI certified visuals. Certified have this little blue checkbox here, and this just means that at least Microsoft has reviewed those visuals and said they are not harmful in any way. So sometimes companies allow, for instance, only Power BI certified visuals, and then would be a filter you can use in order to choose them from these visuals in here. So of course, this is something you have to decide together with your IT department, right? Your IT admins, they of course need to approve specific visuals, and only then you can use them. Because there are also some companies which do not allow any kind of custom visuals. So that depends on the specific company in the environment. So if you want to add something from here, for instance, if I say I have this chiclet slicer here and I want to use this, I simply click on it. And if I do that, it gets loaded. Just a second, and then we can see a little bit more information about it. Here it is. And then I can take a look at the sample. So I can download the sample, which is a sample report in Power BI where the chiclet slicer is used. Or I could also click on add directly. And by the way, here you can see the pricing. This, for instance, is completely free, this visual. So I can go to add in here, and then I just need to wait. And now the import is successful. And if I go in here, under my visuals, you can see there, for instance, already there's a chiclet slicer, right? So this is now appearing here, and I could use it in my report. That's how easy it is to import specific visuals. Next to that, we also have the option to create calculations, which is DAX in Power BI. So DAX is the formula language in Power BI. Like in Excel, we have formulas. In Power BI, we have DAX. And there are two options in here. There are the measure option and the quick measure option. Both of them are currently grayed out. The reason for this is because we currently don't have any data. And if we do not have any data, then of course we can't create any kind of calculations based on data. If you're wondering what is the difference between a measure, new measure, and quick measure, well, if we click on new measure, and we will see this during the course, then this would mean that we need to write DAX completely from scratch, right? If you click on the quick measure option, then you have the option to simply drag and drop specific columns from your data in this option, in this quick measure option, and then Power BI will create the DAX formula for you. And there's also an option, if it's enabled by the admins of your IT department, to simply write text, and then based on the text on your question, then Power BI tries to create the DAX formula in order to solve this question. So they might be quite powerful, these quick measures. I still feel and I think that it is important that you need to learn DAX and understand DAX. The reason for this, and that's why we focus on creating DAX measures during this course, is of course, maybe the quick measure will not give you exactly the specific result you need. Maybe you have a certain use case, and this use case cannot be accomplished by simply using the default quick measures, and then you need to tweak, you need to transform, you need to change the DAX measure a little bit. But if you have never used DAX before and you don't know how DAX works, then of course there's no way you can modify the quick measure exactly to the way you need it, right? And that's why it's very important to understand DAX in Power BI, and that's why we focus on creating DAX measures ourselves. Next to that, we have the sensitivity labels here. This can be enabled by your IT department, and this just means that you can add a sensitivity label to your specific Power BI reports and also inside the Power BI service. And that just means that if you do this, then when other people in your organization use and interact with your report, they will see the sensitivity label, and this might have an influence how they can interact with the report. For instance, if it has a confidentially sensitivity label, that means that, for instance, that people are not allowed to download the report or to print the report as a PDF and so on. So this can be turned off by adding sensitivity labels. But this is something which you do not decide on your own. This normally at first needs to be activated by the IT admins, and then you might think with your colleagues and also with your organization, your department maybe, which kind of sensitivity labels is the right one for our reports. Next to this, we have the option to publish our report, so sharing, because at the end of the day, here we are in Power BI Desktop. And what we do is we analyze our data, we clean our data, and then of course we create a report which we want to share with, for instance, the board members or our superior or our colleagues in the department or whoever we want to share. But at the end of the day, we want to share our report. And in order to do this, then normally we do not save the report and send the Power BI file via email. Of course, we could do this to a colleague, but normally we would like to have the option to create the report, then send it to the Power BI service. And that's what's meant by publish. This just means that you send your Power BI report to the Microsoft Cloud, so the Power BI service. And then your colleagues only need to use their browser in order to access your report and interact with it. And also the experience, of course, is a little bit different because they are the users, the consumers of your report. They do not need to have all these options here to enter data and so on. They only want to see the report. They want to click in the report. They want to filter and slice and dice the data. And this can be done via their browser after the report has been published, using this publish option when you share it. Of course, this also requires a sign-in, so an account for Microsoft, because otherwise you cannot send the data to the Power BI service. But of course, if you use Power BI inside an organization, then of course they have their own Power BI. Not their own, but they use the Power BI service. You have your own, let's say, space inside the Power BI service, and this way you can securely then share your reports and inside the organization. So that's it actually regarding the home menu. So you see there's quite a lot. Also, what I did not mention here are these options here, but probably if you have worked with any kind of Microsoft product before, then you're familiar with those. Because this is just, for instance, we can cut, we can copy something, we can copy or also the format and use it on a second visual and so on. So this can be done here using these options. These are kind of the similar in PowerPoint, for instance, but also in Excel, they're also available, most of them at least. So that's it actually under Home. Then under Insert, that's the next one. If you go here, then again, you can see that there's an option for the visuals. That's what I meant when I said or talked about redundancy, if you remember. Then, for instance, we have the visuals here we can simply select something, for instance here, and I have my template in here, but that's actually exactly the same as if you go back to home and do it from here, right? This is actually exactly the same as you find here. And also there's this more visuals, which again refers to the app source, or also import data if you have downloaded them on your local drive. Next to this, at the beginning here, I just want to mention this as well. This allows us to add new pages to our report. So you can see here, we are currently on page number 1. I can also double click here and rename it, for instance, start. Press enter. This would be now the starting page. I can right click here. I can also here rename the page if I want to do it this way. And I can also duplicate the page. And this can also be achieved here. If you go new page here, again, you can also duplicate the page, start, which we currently selected, or I can create a blank page. And the blank page, either click it, create it here by clicking on it, or you go down there, click on the plus symbol, new page. This will do exactly the same. So let me just right click here, say duplicate. Then you can see I have a duplicate of start, and now I have 2 pages. And I can rename this. I can say this, for instance, hello page number 2. Let's say number 2, like that. Okay, let me press enter. And you see that now I have a different here. And if I go back to my starting page, you see that this would be page number 1, and this will be page number 2. So again, let's say this one here. That, for instance, is my page 2. Okay. Of course, you can rename this then exactly the way you want it. And you can also, by the way, like to mention this, if I click on start here, I can drag it, I can place it here, and now page number 2 is the first page. Starting page here is the second page. And again, select it, let me drag it up here before, and now it's there, right? If you want to reorder the pages, you can do that quite easily by simply dragging and dropping the pages. So that's what you find here. Next to this, we have, again, here various visuals. But all these visuals, which you can see here, for instance, the key influencer, which is an AI visual, the decomposition true, also this AI-driven, and also the smart narrative, this also AI-driven visual. But these visuals you can see here, they are also part from the visual box here. So they're also, these ones here, for instance, you can find them here under AI visuals. And the same is true for these ones which appear here, which are coming from the Power Platform. So maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. But this, for instance, is Power Apps, which allows you, which is also part of the Power Platform, and allows you to build your own apps with no or low code, right? And then there's also Power Automate, which is also part of the Power Platform. This allows us to create automatic workflows. Meaning, for instance, let's say you have, if an email arrives, then something needs to be triggered automatically. For instance, then a team message needs to be sent that a new email has arrived to the specific email folder, for instance. These processes where we have a trigger and then something should happen, this can be automated by using Power Automate, which is a separate tool, but also a tool part of the Power Platform. So if you are interested in that, of course, you can dive into this further. And these options here just mean that we can use Power Apps which have been built inside Power Apps, or Power Automate workflows which have been created inside Power Automate. Those can be used inside Power BI as well. So this just means that, so there's a Power Apps visual, which I can click, and then if I have built a Power App, I can use this Power App inside Power BI and interact with the app. So these are options which I have here. This just means, I like to mention this because this just means that the Power Platform itself is interactive. So I can use Power Apps, for instance, inside Power BI, but I can also use Power BI reports inside Power Apps. So that just meant here. And then again, we have the text box, which you've already seen in here. And also we can add buttons, shapes, and also images. So for the buttons, I can go here, and then I can insert any kind of button I want. So you can see a lot of buttons in here, but also for the buttons itself, you can also change, for instance, the specific icons we have in here. And there's also the navigators. There's a page navigator and also a bookmark navigator. So just to show it to you, if I go to page number 2 in here, for instance, and I can go to buttons, and I can use this back button here. I can tick this option, and now I have a back button. And as long as we are here in the Power BI desktop, we are developing our reports, I need to hold Control key. And you can also see that if you hover over that. In here, if you let me hover over it, you can see Control click here to go back to the previous page. So if I hold Control key and click on it, like that, you see that now I'm navigated to the starting page. So you can use those buttons, for instance, for page navigation. I can do that here, if I want to do this. And the control click, this is only necessary as long as we are here in the developer, into the Power BI desktop. After we publishing our report, so remember, if you go to home and publish it to the Power BI service, then if our end user is then consuming the report and interacting with the report, then he or she only needs to click with the left mouse button in order to navigate inside the browser. Okay, so that's it for the buttons, and we're gonna use those buttons later on, of course, when we create our report. Then there will be further options where we can see how these buttons can be used in here. For the page navigator, I just want to mention this maybe because we have two pages, so I can show this to you. If I go to the navigator here and page navigator, then by default, that's what I have. Let me just drag this around like that. This will show all the pages by default, at least you have. So if I go click on control click start here, I will go to the starting page. So this gives me simply, instead of only one button, it gives me all the pages I have. So if I click on the plus symbol and add a third page, page number 1, if I go to page number 2, you see that also page number 1 is there. So this will be automatically extended if I have additional pages. Let me just delete the page, click on a little cross symbol here, go to delete, and now you see I only have 2 pages left. So that's it, what actually this option here, navigator and page navigator, allows us to do. Shapes, I can insert various shapes in here. So let me just do that as well. Let me just click on any of those shapes. So for instance, this one here. And now I have my shape in here, which I can customize further, the shape itself. So if I go here and let me just go to the view option here. Let me just check the formatting option here for now for the shape here. And then of course I can go to the shape style here and I can change here, for instance, the color if I want to do that. So different color in here and so on. I can change everything here. But also this is something we're going to cover later on as well. I just wanted to mention that you can do that. Also in the future, and I'm going to show you, currently it's not supported for all the visual, but you also have here a little icon here which allows you to change specific visuals. But again, this is something we're going to see in the next couple of videos. So that's it for shapes. And also let me go one more on the insert. Then there's also an option to insert an image. For instance, let's say you want to insert your company logo. This can be easily done if you have the logo somewhere stored. Then I'll go to image here, and then I can choose, for instance, this one, Power BI image, which I have here. And now I have my image here, and I can place it somewhere on my report page. Like here, that could be my company logo, and I place it somewhere and I have it inside my reports. So quite easy to do and insert it here. So beside this, under insert, then we also have here the modeling view. And again, some redundancy, what I want to call it, which allows us here to create new measures, which is currently grayed out, as well as also add quick measures, or also new columns and new tables. So new columns and new tables, just referring to a new column, we can add columns, so calculated columns, to a specific table which we imported. So that just means that allows us to create additional calculations and add those as a column to a specific table. That's also currently grayed out because we do not have any data. New table just means that we could insert a manual table. Or in this case, the manual table itself actually is under home, enter data. This under modeling here, we can create a table using DAX expressions. So that can be also done and also something we might want to do during the course. So if you do not know what I'm talking about right now, it's quite difficult to imagine. If you have never seen Power BI before, no worries, I totally understand. But you'll see that when we do this during the course, it's quite easy to do, and then you understand what it does. Change detection, this just means that if you have a live connection, so to your underlying data source, then you can turn this change detection on, and then the page might refresh in real time, or let's say at least, for instance, every 5 seconds, for instance. Then this could be interesting and see that then, for instance, something changes. But this is only interesting for streaming data and data which is frequently changing. So it's not something we're going to cover during the course because most often that's not what you want. Normally, in most of the cases, you import the data in Power BI and then you refresh the data maybe on an hourly basis or once a day or once a month, anything like that. Parameters, this is much more interesting to us because parameters, you can also hover over it if you want to read more. But this can be used in order to do, for instance, what if analysis. So scenario analysis, actually. For instance, we can, what about if we have a price change of 5%? What could this, how can this affect our sales revenue, for instance? This can be done a little bit with those parameter options. And then there are also, this will be the numeric range, and there are also the field parameters, which allow us to create dynamic visualizations. And you'll see this when we're going to cover this during the course. So manage roles and view as, this is security feature. So when do we need this? Well, sometimes we create a report and our goal is that not everybody should see exactly the same data. So let's say we have some colleagues which are located in the US, we have some colleagues which are located in India, and we have also some colleagues which are maybe located in Europe. Now our goal is that the colleagues in US should only see US data. The colleagues in India should only see the Indian data, and the European colleagues should only see European data. Something like that. But they all view the same report. So then we need to make sure that we create roles. And this can be done by manage roles. So we can click on manage roles and then create roles in Power BI Desktop. For instance, as I said, we have a US role which only is referring to sales which happen in the US. And the same is true then for India and then for Europe. And then we need to assign those roles, which we created here, to specific users or to specific groups. For instance, to specific Azure Directory groups. And the assignment, this will be done in the Power BI service. So after we publish our report. But the creation of the roles, this is something we need to do in here, which we can do in here in the Power BI Desktop. And the view as is quite helpful because after you have set up your roles, your security roles, then of course you want to know before you publish your data and assign people to a specific role, you want to know whether your role works, whether the security you have created works. And this can be done by simply then click view as, and then you have the option to choose any of the roles you have created. And if you select the role, then the data or the report will change based on the role you have. And then you see whether your security feature works or not. And that's quite helpful. So you know in advance that it works, and then you can publish it and then assign the people to the role. So the QA here, that's for our purposes now not very important. So this is regarding language settings for the Q&A, but for now and during the course, this is not very important to us. So I'll skip this for now. Under view, we can specify specific, templates in this case, which are themes, which we can assign to Power BI. So if you click on themes here, you see that there are quite a vast amount of report themes. Currently, this one is selected, but I can choose a different one. For instance, just to see this, if I click this one here, now you see this is the new theme. So that's how you can assign specific themes to Power BI, or this one here, and so on. So also what Power BI or Microsoft has done is it also added these accessible themes. Well, as far as I understood, the thing is that some people have difficulties, understanding or seeing color and differentiate between colors, right? Some people are colorblind and so on. And what Microsoft has done in the prior or past, recently, actually, they added additional themes which might be easier to spot for people who have some kind of disability regarding visualization or regarding seeing things. But this, of course, can further be customized. That's something I like to mention here. So if I select one of the themes, like this one, for instance, I have the option, and that's quite important, especially in corporate environments, because most often, for PowerPoint, for instance, and so on, you know this as well, you have a corporate identity, which means that you have specific colors next to your logo, of course, and specific fonts maybe you're going to use all the time, and you want to implement those in Power BI. And if you want to do this, then under the option here, you can go to the customize current theme, for instance. You can click on this, and then you can specify what kind of colors you want to use. So what's here the first color? You can use a hex code here or RGB codes, and you can customize exactly the way you want it. You can do this for the texts. You can change the fonts family here for cards, KPIs, for the titles in your reports. For the visuals, you can change the color of the background, the border, the header, and so on. So everything here can be customized. And next to that, you also have the option, so if you change something and apply it, then it gets applied. But next to that, you also have the option, if you go one more time in here, you can also download the theme. So save the current theme, this one, and this will save a JSON file. And of course, sometimes it's easier for people to save actually the JSON file and then modify the specific template inside the JSON file. And if you do this, then you can go to the option, in this case, browse for themes. And this allows you then to select the specific JSON file you have modified and import a theme. So Power BI does not only allow to modify an existing theme inside Power BI, you can also create your own theme. And if you want to know how to do this, check the Microsoft documentation, because they specify exactly how a JSON theme needs to look like, if you do this for the first time for your organization, for instance. And then you can import the theme you have created and use this. That would be another option. So quite a lot of options to style here. And if you create reports for yourself, then of course you might also go to the theme gallery, because there are some people who have uploaded themes to this gallery. That's just an internet website where you can take a look at what themes they have created, and you can also download them and use them if you want to do that. But most often for a company environment, that's not that interesting because they have already set up their default colors and so on. But that's what you can do here. Next to the theme options here, we have the page view. The page view allows us to fit the width and so on. That allows us here to change how the Power BI report looks itself. So default is fit to page, but you can change this to fit width and also actual size, especially if you create a Power BI report which is bigger than the default size. The default size is normally the PowerPoint, the same size as PowerPoint. By default, I think it's 1600 pixel times 900 pixel. I'm not quite sure, but I think that's like that. But you can also change it. So if you have want to have a report with a scroll bar which is much longer, for instance. So the default is fit to page, and probably we're going to use this the whole time. I just want to mention what this is so you know that. Mobile layout allows us to create mobile layouts for a report. So if I go in here, mobile layout, you see that now I can create a custom report based on what we have inside our report for mobile devices. And this is quite interesting because that means we can create a different report for mobile devices. So let's say the CEO of our company also consumes our report, but he or she maybe is not interested in all the visualizations we have, only specific ones, for instance, only the key KPIs, and not everything we have in our report. And this allows us, this mobile view, to only drag, you can see here the elements which we currently have, not that much because we have not created so much, but you can see all the visualizations and also the icons and so on we have. And you can simply then drag and drop things directly inside the view, like that. I like to add the logo, I can make this bigger here, for instance, and then I have my logo. And then I like to have this this box here, the shape, I can drag this in here, and then I can also make this bigger if I want, like that. And of course I can scroll down and then add additional elements. So the beauty here is that you can really customize the mobile view and make it completely different from the original view, if you want to, and if you have the need for that. And you can also just click on this if you want to remove all the visualizations, click on it, and yes, I want to remove everything, and then you can start from scratch if you want to do that. So this can be done in here. There's no need to do it. So if you do not specify a specific mobile layout, then by default, of course, on a mobile device, when they have the Power BI app, then they would see exactly the same report as you have created for the normal. So switch to desktop layout, let me do this, then they would see the report like that. So it's up to you whether you have a requirement for that, but I just want to mention that it is available if you need it. These options we have here, there are the grid lines, snap to grid, and log options. And grid lines just means that you can see the grid lines in the end, at the back. Snap to grid just means if you tick this option, then the visualizations are snapping to the grid lines. And log objects, if you tick this option, also sometimes helpful. That just means if you tick it, then now you cannot move the visuals around. They're all now fixed currently. They are logged. That's sometimes helpful if you create a report and you do not want to drag anything around while you're creating your final touch, or you want to interact with it. So that's it actually for that. Next, under log objects, that was the last one we checked. I unchecked it again so I can move the visuals around. There are these options here, the show panes. The show panes, this is what we need to select in order to show our panes on the right side. Currently you can see that the filter pane is activated, the data pane, and the formatting pane. And I always encourage you, hover over it, something, and then you get some more information about that. But the filter pane here, this is, if I make this bigger, that's where we can drag filters in order to slice and dice the data. Currently it's checked, so it's available. If I uncheck it here, you see that now it's gone. The same is true for the data and the formatting pane. The difference is that only one of those is currently selected here or visible, which is the format. If I check this one here, that's the data one, the little cylinder. Now you can see, you would see at least, you see this later on in the next couple of videos, there you can see your data. So all the columns you have in your data set. And if you add additional ones like bookmarks here, you would see them appearing here as well. And selection, and then for instance, performance analyzer and sync slicers. So you can add all of them in here. And if I want to see them here, I just need to check it and then it appears here. I can also, of course, click on a cross symbol if I want to remove it. So you see, if I close it now, then you can see it's also not selected anymore. And I need to reselect it in order to see it again here on the sideline. If you want to see more than just one at the same time, because you see that if I select the other one, then this one always gets changed. That might change in the future, but currently, at least in Power BI, it's implemented like that. You need to right click on one of those and say open a new pane. And now you would see them next to each other. So you can achieve this if you want, but by default, you always will replace the one you have currently in here. So for instance, if I go to bookmark here, you would see that now the bookmark has replaced the other ones. If you want to add 3 of them, go here to the next one, like that one, open new pane, right click here, open new pane. You can add them and see them, all of them. But by default, as I said, select one of those and the other ones are just removed. This one here is removed, the bookmarks is there. If you close it like that, that's what I meant. Select one and the other, then it is overwritten. The filter one is always visible. That's there the whole time. That's the difference. But again, this might change in the near future. Currently, it's implemented like that. So next to the panes we have in here, let's go to the optimize option here. This is all regarding the optimization of Power BI. So pause visuals just means that you pause the visuals, so you do not, the visuals don't filter each other. Because the default behavior, and you also see this, we explore this together, is that if you click on a visual, then the other visuals get filtered. But if you want to pause this, if you do want to disable that, you can click on pause visuals. And refresh visuals would then refresh the visuals. There are also a few additional optimization presets. Take this one. By default, it's interactivity between the visuals. So that's what I meant. If I say click on a visual and the other visuals get filtered, but you can also choose query reduction or customize. If you click on customize, this would open this pane, and this can then disable, for instance, certain kinds of filtering between the visuals. These options are normally only important if you have some kind of performance issues in Power BI. So if you have really a lot of data and it takes a long time to load, then it might make sense to dive deeper into this. But by default, that's something you don't need to activate here. Because if you have a smaller data set, and even, let's say, a data set with a few million rows, also not a problem in Power BI. That's normally not an issue, though you don't need to refer to the optimized window here. But if you have really some kind of performance issues, then these options might make sense to dive deeper into. Apply all slicers, that just means that if you have various slicers, you have the option to add this to your report. I'll also show you how that works. And then you need to click this apply all slicers. And only if you click this button, then all the slicers you have set up, for instance, you specified a certain country and specified a certain product and so on. And only if you click the apply all slicers button, only then those slicers get applied on the visuals. So also something which might make sense and helps to improve user experience, maybe if you have a lot of slicers, but also improves regarding performance. It helps improving this. Under help, there's something about the information about Power BI, so what kind of version you currently use. There are also some kind of training videos that's also coming from Power BI, so from Microsoft directly. Normally, you can go to the documentation. You can read more if you want to do that. You can also go to the community if you have a specific question, and all these things are available here. I think most of them are self-explanatory, also if you hover over them, so I don't dive too deep into that for now. External tools. This just means if you have installed some kind of external tools which you want to use in Power BI, then those tools will be visible here. You can see that I have installed a few tools. By default, they should not be visible for you because you do not use them. But if you have installed them, if you have installed external tools, they will appear here, and you can use them by simply clicking on them. Also, for now and for this course, they are not that important, but I just want to mention that this is available here. And I also have kind of a second course where we dive into Tabular Editor if that's something you're interested in later on. But that's basically it regarding all the tabs in here. So quite a lot we have covered, and I totally understand that, of course, there's no need for you to understand and fully grasp everything we have seen so far. But the main goal here is really to give you some kind of guide, some kind of tour, so you see what's available in here. And also, then you will see later on when you're going to use those features and remember, okay, that was that, okay? Before we end this video, there are also a few additional things I'd like to mention. These are these three tabs here. We have a report view. That's the view we are currently on. This is where we can see all the visualizations we have built, all the report pages. But then there are also two additional views. Also, we check them out later on. The first one here is the data view. The data view will just show the tables we have. So after we have imported the data, we will see all the various tables we have in here, and they will also appear here. You can think of it like really a view like in an Excel sheet. So we can see exactly, okay, what kind of data is there. We can also have the option to filter a column and so on, but we'll see this later on. I just want to mention that there's also this data view in here. And finally, very, very important is the model view. The model view here shows us all the tables and the relationship between those tables. So if you have some database, some SQL background, you know that normally you have a fact table and various dimension tables. That just means you combine information from various tables and then you filter data based on the relationships you have. Now, if this is something completely new to you and you do not know too much about joins, for instance, and relational tables, relational databases, then you might have some prior experience with Excel, for instance, right? And if so, you probably know that in Excel we have, for instance, VLOOKUP or index match, these kind of options. Or in newer Excel versions, there's this XLOOKUP, I think it's called, right? But the idea is that you do not have everything inside one specific table. You might have some additional information which comes from another table. And in order to link this together, then you can do a VLOOKUP, for instance, or an index match. So you basically map the data from the second table to your first table based on a common field. And that's basically how the relationship work in databases or in Power BI as well. So for any database administrators and so on, that was probably quite simple how I explained it, but hopefully for everyone here who is not familiar with that, that gives you some kind of intuition what it is. And this in the model view, this is where we create those relationships between the tables. So if we have various tables, they have common fields, and we want to combine them in order to slice and dice our data, which comes from different tables, then we need to create relationships, and this will be done in here. And we're going to do this together in the next couple of videos now. So that's basically it as a tour through the whole Power BI interface. These are two videos, lectures, quite long in total, I get that. And as I said, I do not expect that you keep everything which you've seen here, but hopefully if you're brand new to Power BI, that gives you some kind of intuition, some kind of guide, and so you know exactly, okay, that's the interface I'm going to work with, or we're going to work with together, and hopefully that was helpful for you. So thanks a lot for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.